Would you rather be in a world war? Would you rather be in Asia, in Africa, in South America, in North America, in Europe? Obviously, it depends on where the war is. The previous two wars were in Europe. They were right in the middle of Europe. And even if you're in Switzerland, sure, you didn't take part in the war, but you weren't exactly comfortable where you're right in the middle of it. And obviously, I'm sure a lot of Swiss people were very, very nervous about the war, be it in World War One, be it in World War Two. And from 1945, we've had a lot of war, but not in Europe necessarily. So in the Middle East, in Asia especially, right now there's terrorism and gangs and like a lot of violence and war in Africa as well. Some separatist movements and all that. The Americas have been relatively peaceful in a way, but the U.S., for example, has partaken in a lot of war, even if it wasn't in their territory. And so, where would you want to be? Where is a good place to be? And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Let's talk about Europe for a bit. Europe is a very interesting continent, but it's not the safest one to be right now. In fact, there's a ongoing war right now between Ukraine and Russia, and it is technically within European land. It's only a few kilometers from, let's say, Poland or Estonia or Belarus. So it's definitely something to consider. But Europe could be safe in a world war. If you wanted to go to Europe, or if you wanted to stay in Europe for any reason, maybe because it's developed, maybe because it's closer to family or whatever, maybe you speak the languages. Three countries I would consider if you're willing to stay in Europe is there are Austria, Switzerland, and Ireland. And that's because they're not part of NATO. So the probability that they would be involved with some sort of attack is much smaller because, well, if you're in NATO, if Portugal is attacked, Estonia has to get into it, or Finland, or Sweden, or Denmark, for example. Whereas if Switzerland gets attacked, no other country is obliged to help Switzerland. But on the other hand, if any other country is attacked, Switzerland isn't obliged to help that other country. So Switzerland might be a good option if you still want to stay in Europe. Obviously, it's a beautiful, gorgeous, neutral, peaceful country. And even if there was a war, and for example, all of the EU entered the war, Switzerland might be pretty much the only country in Europe to not be in that war, to not be at war in that moment. Austria and Ireland are not as safe as Switzerland because, despite not being in NATO, they definitely are in the EU. And as EU moves towards further integration, it might be the case that even though you don't have a particular treaty like NATO, for example, compelling you to protect yourself along with all the other countries. At the same time, if you're part of the EU, if you use the same currency, if you have sort of the same political structure attaching you to all of the other European countries, pretty much, the probability that you're going to be able to give it a miss is actually not that high. So Ireland and Austria, in relative terms, they might be safer than other European countries. They definitely might be safer than, for example, Poland or Hungary, which are further east, and they are in NATO, they are in the EU, but they wouldn't be as safe as Switzerland, for example. My take might be controversial, but I don't think that there's any really stable, solid country in the case of a world war in Asia or in Africa. Obviously, most countries in Africa are not that developed, and in the context of like war or struggling or whatever, the probability that there could be civil war, that one of the countries could just attack one another, or separatist movements or terrorism is actually fairly high. I would not be comfortable staying in pretty much any country in Africa during a world war. In Asia, on the other hand, there are some countries that could be interesting. For example, the UAE, it's been trying to be pretty neutral. It's got flights everywhere. Dubai's got flights everywhere. Singapore obviously is really developed, and it tries to have a middle way between like pretty much all of the parties, between China and Russia and America. It's got a open visa policy. It's the strongest passport in the world. But even those countries in particular in Asia, uh, you're just too close to the fire. Like Singapore is just too close to China. It's too close to India. It's too close to everything that's going on in Asia. And in the case of war, obviously the Asia Pacific would be a very, very relevant region. And I don't think Singapore would be able to 100%, or not with at least 100% certainty, escape from that conflict. The same with the UAE. It might be a very, very stable country, but it's literally in the single most unstable region in the whole world, which is the Middle East. Right now, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, only a few hundred kilometers maybe from the UAE. They're all very unstable. They're all at war in one way or another. And so to claim that the UAE would be safe, given it's right in the middle of everything, it could be, that could be the case, but I don't think it's that likely. That leaves the Americas and Oceania. Now, if you consider the US a safe bet for a world war, I think you're a little crazy because the probability that the US would be in that war is actually quite high. And though it is unlikely still that the US territory would be invaded, if you're talking about like a full out world war, it's actually is possible that it is. And even if it isn't, wherever the war is, the US is going to be there. And you, as a male, a young male between 18 and 35, the probability that you might be pushed into it if you're American is actually reasonably high. So, as someone who's not American, I would not recommend moving there if you think that is something to happen. And if you are American and you think that a world war is incoming, it might be useful for you to get some sort of second passport because even if you don't get thrown into the army, for example, it might be that you get your travel privileges limited. We already saw how the US doesn't allow American citizens to visit North Korea anymore. And if it's North Korea, it's fine, right? But what if it's North Korea and Russia? Or what if it's Europe? Or what if it's Africa? Or what if it's pretty much all of the countries? And so to have a second passport in that sense might be some sort of leverage that you might use if you're afraid of a world war. Going further south into South America, Central America, obviously Mexico might be an interesting choice, but it's still a little bit too close to the US to really consider. The probability that it would be at war directly with the US is inexistent, but it might be targeted indirectly by some sort of opponent, be it Russia or China or Iran or whatever. Uh, as soon as you get to Colombia, I think it's a little safer because you're further enough away. I'm going to put the map here again. I've already talked about it in my South America video, but I think South America might be a very, very solid choice here. It's far away from nearly all countries with nuclear missile range. It is peaceful. It is neutral. Brazil, for example, it's a non-NATO ally, but it's also part of BRICS, and it's also got some close relationship with Europe, with through Portugal and Spain, especially with Italy as well, through a lot of Italian descent. It's got special relationship with some countries in Africa because of Portuguese, so Angola, Mozambique, and so it's just a very out and about kind of country where it kind of mingles with everyone. And you could say the same about most South American countries. The probability, if you had to guess, that one continent would be fine in a war, I would definitely guess that it would be South America. And even more so than more isolated regions like New Zealand or Australia, because those countries, they are more polarized. They're more pro-US, and that might mean they do have treaties with the US. They have the Five Eyes program, and so it might indicate that they would go another way, that they would go in favor of the US, that they might send troops, that they might actively engage in the war, especially with Australia. Australia is a little more hawkish in that sense. New Zealand, it's a little less likely. I would definitely put, well, if you don't want to stay in Europe, if you don't want to stay in Switzerland or Ireland, if you don't want to stay in South America for some reason, maybe you don't like Spanish, maybe you don't like Portuguese, and you want to be somewhere where it's really isolated, it's still fairly safe in case of war, and it's pretty far away, New Zealand actually might be the best choice for you.